Welcome everyone to Daily Origins Lifestyle Interview Series, a series where we speak with business owners, trainers, community leaders, and beyond that are currently elevating their community to find their origin. I'm your host, Genevieve Kavanaugh, and today we're speaking with Jeff Siegel, the founder of Jeff Siegel Wellness. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, Genevieve. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you've been up to.
Yeah, I am a health and wellness coach, and my friend likes to describe me as a relationship coach for your mind and for your body, which is something that has always stuck with me. And I focus a lot on that mind-body connection and that mind-body disconnection and all sorts of problems that can cause to our mental and our physical health.
That's wonderful. I think that's a great way to describe you. I've known you for a little over a year and a half now, I would say. Tell us a little bit about JE Wellness or Jeff Siegel Wellness in your origin story.
Yeah. I love the idea of an origin story because it's like every great superhero has some sort of origin story, and we all have a story to share. That's important to hear. So I like to kind of trace my origin story back to younger Jeff as a teenager suffering from an eating disorder to the point where I had to drop out of high school and enter a residential hospitalization program, and really was on the brink of starving myself to death. And it was a pretty difficult time for me, for my family, for my friends. It was confusing, it was disorienting. There was a part of me that just truly wanted to be healthy and just sort of like a normal, like every other kid, wanted to fit in and have a normal life. And then there was a part of me I felt like I couldn't really control, but this voices in my head telling me about what I could eat and couldn't eat, and listening or not listening to my body, my signals of hunger, of fullness, of my need to rest and recover, to sleep. So I think of this largely as a kind of mind and body war. And I was going to war against my body. And so this dug me into a deep hole of both kind of physical sickness and mental depression and hopelessness. And what ultimately turned it all around was a great deal of support from family, from doctors, from therapists, and then a part of deep inside of me that truly wanted to heal and to grow. And I just nurtured that part as well as I could, and slowly, bit by bit, kind of pulled myself out of this dark hole, and year after year continued to kind of build my own health back up, and to learn as much as I possibly could about what happened to me. Why do people fall into disordered eating habits? Why do people fall into disordered kind of body image issues? And ultimately, how can we better take care of our bodies, in service of greater health, happiness, well-being? And so this led me to study the whole gamut of things, from psychology and neuroscience to Buddhism and Eastern philosophy, to theories of adult development and education and how people learn and grow, in my attempt to really kind of synthesize as much as I could in service, again, of this mind-body connection.
That's really incredible. And I greatly appreciate you sharing that story with us. I know bringing up the past is always like reliving it in the moment. So it can always be hard just speaking about it. So I greatly appreciate you sharing that part of your life with us. In your personal training style, you have a blend of fitness and science and spirituality, as you said. Can you tell us more of like how you integrate that into your everyday life, or how you work with clients?
Yeah. So I think of it as like a foreground and background, and at different points, certain things are going to be in the foreground and other stuff's going to be in the background. And then sometimes that shifts, so if the primary thing is more working with the physical body, as in the case would be of like a personal training session, or somebody coming and saying like, hey, like I'm really looking to get in shape to, run a 5K or go on this trip, or I just want to, improve my overall strength. So it's like, then we're going to foreground the physical training piece. But I never want to ever lose sight of these background elements. Because
Hmm.
if you ignore the things like nutrition, if you ignore the things like the relationships that you're in, if you ignore your career and your work and your family, because all of those, right, are impacting your physiology, your body, in terms of the stressors that you're putting on your body, your ability to recover, in terms of the meaning. And this is a huge piece that I see that's missing so much, is this, the deeper meaning of like why bother putting all this time and energy into taking care of your body, into trying to get it to look a certain way or to do a certain thing, when ultimately so much of it is outside of your control, right?
Hmm.
And it's like, you can't, your body is aging and is going to get sick, and things are going to happen, and you can't control all of those factors. And so I think there needs to be a deeper sense of purpose for people to engage in their physical practice. And so for me, it's like, I love the physical part. Like, I love getting sweaty. I love, running. I love doing different things with my body, challenging it, feeling that tension, and relaxation. But like, the movement practice itself almost becomes a kind of a ritual of meaning for me, of like getting back into my body, just reconnecting with those deeper, signals of what does it feel like to be fully relaxed, or what does it feel like to be extremely tense, and to
Hmm.
learn to be, in conversation with that. I think a lot of people have a difficult time truly being in their body,
Yep.
and it's, to nobody's fault. Like, it's really difficult. Our bodies are the source of, so much pleasure, but also so much pain, and it can be really challenging to truly slow down enough and pay attention to that pain, to pay attention to that fatigue, that tiredness, whatever is there. A lot of times we'd rather ignore it. And then the other part is, a lot of times we've never been taught, you know we don't have good role models, or maybe we never had the practice or the education of what it's like to actually slow down, and to like be in our bodies in a way where we're like not constantly fighting it.
Hmm.
Huge thing for me, a part of my practice, and a part of my whole journey, and as you said, my origin story, is trying not to make my body wrong.
Okay.
And this is so hard for me. And for so many years, I would kind of really judge myself based upon that day's workout, or how my body felt, or and if it didn't perform the way I wanted it to, or if it didn't feel the way I wanted it to, or if it didn't look the way I wanted it to, like, I would get so frustrated, I would get so angry with myself, at my body. And ultimately, that never led anywhere helpful, never led anywhere productive, right? It's like, I'm just launching again more of that war against myself. And so
Yeah.
learning to not make my body wrong, to just accept, like, you know what, like, this is all that maybe my body can do right now. And the key is right now, because I know tomorrow is going to be different, and there's a and they'll be able to do different things. But it's really hard when you feel like, hey, like, I have potential, and I'm not, I'm not living up to that potential. But there's a certain degree of like radical acceptance, all right, that then stops you from fighting what's happening in this moment, and then that gives you a new opening of like, okay, then I just ask, like, well, what can I do today?
Right.
What is possible? If we're focusing on the physical training part, it's like, how can I move my body today in a way that's going to be beneficial and is going to feel good? And I just start, you start working with that. And so it's a lot more of like a softer approach. It's a lot more of a kind of a compassionate and intuitive approach to
Hmm.
training. And this is sort of where I'm at now with my practice and how I approach things. I wasn't always that way. I was definitely used to be more kind of program and rigid. And I think, it's helpful to think about that. Not everybody can just jump right into this sort of intuitive place. I think it is helpful to build those building blocks, and to have more of a program as you're getting started, because that gives you the structure, that gives you the scaffolding you need to
Right.
begin to practice again, being in your body, pushing it in different ways, learning how to manage fatigue and recovery. And then over time, you develop the skill where then you actually, you don't depend upon that structure so much, and you can just train in a little bit more of this intuitive way. But it really depends on where you're at in your personal journey with your body.
Yeah, I like all that you've had to say so far, and I think the points that you pulled out, especially about, you do have to start somewhere with, maybe having a structured program, getting yourself, wherever you are in your journey, and then finally getting to the point where the intuitive movement feels good. For those who might be struggling with the issue of purpose, like you mentioned before, how do you guide them into finding that purpose? Because, like you said, are you doing it for just how you look, how society thinks you should look? Like, what's
Mhm.
what's the key to finding that purpose that people can start feeling comfortable with?
Yeah, is a great question, and I wish there was some super clear, obvious, easy answer of
You
like,
mean to
yeah,
tell me
here.
there's not a key that we're all missing in a book that you
Here's your
know?
purpose, right? um, yeah, and I think the tricky part about that is seeing purpose and meaning as something that's constantly in motion, that's constantly being created, right? It's like you're always adding to it. It's like this beautiful sculpture or artwork, and it's like every day you get an opportunity to kind of like add another brushstroke, and you don't necessarily know what the final picture image is going to look like. I don't know if anybody does, and
Right.
that's the beautiful part of it. Because other people get to come in and they get to add their art to it as well, and it's like we create something together that's even more beautiful than you could have imagined. uh, but I think, it's just like the for me the important part is actually not like being able to concretely say 100% like, yes, like this is what gives me purpose and meaning in life. Although I think it is helpful to really clarify your values. What I find to be more helpful for so many people is just to ask good questions. And I feel like if you're asking the question of yourself, like, hey, like, is this aligned with, what I really care about in the world? Does this bring me joy and fulfillment? Is this
Mhm.
helping me become the person that I want and know I can become? Is this helping all of us, get somewhere better? Like, so if you ask these really big, broad, open-ended questions, I think then it kind of pulls you towards things that are going to kind of feel purposeful, and then the
Yeah.
meaning is created then in the process itself. And I know that's sort of like, a very big kind of up in the clouds answer, and it might be hard to kind of like pull that back down to like, hey, I just want to work out. um, but as you're saying, it's like, I think it really is important to ask those questions, because otherwise
Mhm.
we end up chasing after goals and ideals that uh, are, we haven't really critically examined. And so that means often they're not really our goals. They're not really our ideals. They're societies and cultures and families and other people's. And this is especially true when it comes to our bodies, because, right, we're bombarded with images of what a sort of ideal, fit, sexy, healthy body looks like, and everybody has some image in their mind of what that desirable body is.
Mhm.
And so you really need to ask, well, like, is that truly the most desirable body? Or, is it just some culturally constructed thing? And the answer is like, it is a culturally constructed thing. Like, B is like, is that what I want for myself? Like, C, is that even attainable for me and for my body? It's like, so you begin to like unravel some of those layers. Otherwise, yeah, it's like, well, we're going to be all chasing after this, very, very white, very, cis, heteronormative, like lean, muscular, blonde, blue eye ideal of a human. Um,
Yeah.
and even if you don't ascribe to that as any sort of form of virtue or beauty, which you certainly shouldn't, right? It's like just like moving away from those hyper stereotyped ideals to come back to a place of like, yeah, like I want to honor that everybody, should be able to look in the mirror and feel good about how they look. Like, looking good is great, but also making sure that you're doing that based upon your own internal set of values, right? Your own inner compass, and not getting overly hung up on what society says is good or bad. But it's that's so difficult. And I was just talking to a friend this morning about this, of like, will we ever feel like, our bodies are enough? Will we ever be
Right.
satisfied or happy in our bodies? And neither of us had a good answer for that question, because maybe the answer is no, and maybe we just need to accept that and be okay. But like, I want to help people be more satisfied than not, be more happy than unhappy when it comes to how your body looks.
I completely agree with that. There's so many times where I'll look back on images, I'm like, wow, I thought this of myself then, and I'm this now. And just keeping that negative thoughts in your mind it's tough, but it's a daily process that we all have to, check ourselves every day where we can. And as a female, I know that like the body images and issues that women face, it's talked about a lot, but a lot of the conversation about men and their body issues just haven't really been front of mind, at least in a lot of the media. Um, but I know you have some experience with that. What do you think, how body image affects men?
Yeah. So to all the men out there, like I want to say, uh, it's okay if you don't like your body, and it's okay to talk about that and to share that. And I think there's a lot of shame that goes unspoken for men when it comes to their bodies, and that can lead to a lot of self-loathing and a lot of kind of like self-criticism and judgment that often just kind of gets bottled up because, as again, thinking about the kind of stereotypical masculine frameworks where men are supposed to sort of take all of that emotional vulnerable stuff and shove it down, and it's nobody's business, and just suck it up and muscle through it and deal with it. And so, all of that stuff just sort of circulates, and often it causes a lot of harm. And sometimes then that anger towards ourself then actually just it comes out, and it comes out in really violent ways where, again, men, it can be so abusive to themselves, but then also to others and to women. Uh, and so I think, if we can get upstream of that and help men, you know, again, learn how to tune into those emotions, to the more tender, vulnerable things that are going on inside, develop that emotional intelligence to be able to recognize when some of those feelings are coming up, to recognize when they're being a jerk to themselves, and to what kind, the impact that's having, and then to be able to process that and share that and in healthier ways, so it doesn't, so it doesn't feel like you're having to shoulder this whole burden on your own, and B, so it doesn't get locked up only to explode out in these really destructive ways at some later time. And I see fitness as one potentially really helpful tool, right?
Hmm.
And like every tool, it can be used for good, and it can be used in destructive ways, and I've seen both in myself and in other people that I've worked with, where it's like fitness can be this great tool to like tap into that inner anger and primal energy, and to just like kind of let it out in by doing burpees and climbing over walls and throwing balls and those sort of things, is a really great way to reconnect with that sort of like animalistic impulse. But then it can also certainly become a self-destructive thing, when we get overly caught up in those processes, or we don't have other coping mechanisms to handle stuff, and again, or we get overly attached to fitness as representative of like our own internal self-worth and self-value.
Yeah, it really good points there, and being able to cope with those issues that are coming up in other ways just besides fitness. How are you coaching your clients that have issues like that come up?
Yeah. uh, the place I always begin is tuning back into the body, trying to be able to consciously take your attention and to place it in the body, and to begin to notice those more subtle things that our body is telling us. And a lot of times it's just a matter of taking a moment to slow down, right? So much of us, we're just moving so quickly through our days. Like the world itself is moving so fast and at an ever increasingly speed, and we're constantly being bombarded, right, with information and media all the time. And it's a lot. We're always taking in stuff, you know, and we don't often give ourselves the time to process or to digest all these things that we're taking in. So step one is slowing down, creating a little bit of space, and then beginning to tune your attention in and say, hey, like what is going on for me, right? This question of like, what is true for you right now? Can you answer that question? And that requires, developing some skills of mindfulness to be able to pay attention, and to pay attention in a particular way. Because again, we don't want to make our body wrong. We want to try to accept wherever we're at right now as opposed to fight it. And so, it's easy to turn in and be like, oh, like things hurt and I'm tired, and then get really upset about that. And then we're like, ah, F this. I'm gonna go drink a Red Bull and just like push through it, right? Versus, saying, yeah, you know what, like I am really tired and parts of my body hurt. And you're like, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. Like maybe I'm not sleeping well, maybe I'm really overwhelmed with family stuff, and you're like, okay. So then, if we start from there, from this place of curiosity and acceptance, then it opens up this opportunity to ask, well, what is the most skillful thing I can do right now to take care of myself?
Yeah.
Right? Maybe that means just a little bit of stretching. Maybe that means a walk around the block. Maybe that means I take a nap, right? And then you do that, and then you come back in and you check in again. So it's this like constant checking in and course correcting, right? And that way we begin to, develop again that relationship of our mind being with our body, in service of our body, instead of mind over or mind against our body.
Oh, I love that. And it all comes back to that intuitive part of listening to your body and what you need, and not just pushing through just to, check those boxes. If you're being honest with your body and how it's feeling, then you're going to be treating it the right way.
Yes. And the key word that you just said is honesty. And honesty is really the quickest route to better health. And I think a lot of times it's so hard. It's so hard to be really honest with ourselves and to admit, like, yeah, I'm not feeling good, and I can't do this thing that maybe my mind dreamed up that I should be doing today, right now. So what can I do? Because that feels like a lot of self defeat. And I also, I'm not advocating for, giving up goals or saying that we shouldn't, have grit or perseverance or endurance. There are certainly times where it is appropriate to just kind of push through it,
Yeah.
and especially in if you're involved in a competition, or if it's, if there's a clear finish line that you're racing towards, then yeah, like, put on the gas and go for it, right? But the problem is, like, when we make that a constant everyday part of our life, where like we're constantly putting on the gas, like rushing to the end, overriding what our body's telling us, it becomes unsustainable.
Yeah.
So it's having the wisdom to know, like, okay, this is a time I'm going to push, but also to recognize, I think, the default should be coming back to this place of a little bit more mindful, intuitive, collaborative place with your body.
That's really great advice. And you've been super helpful with Daily Origin and sharing different meditations through dealing with the pandemic. One of them, actually, that you shared, I did constantly going through a time where I needed to do, I think it was a 7-minute one. How did you find, did you get trained to teach meditation, or did you just start reading and learning about it on your own?
Hmm. The answer is both. I've done some various teacher trainings for teaching mindfulness and meditation to college students, to athletes, and a lot of it's been through my own journey as a meditator over the last probably 15-ish years. I've really kind of, I've dabbled in a lot of different meditative traditions, I read a ton of books, but then I really took it to another level when I was living in Hong Kong, and I did a entire master's program in Buddhist studies and got very involved with a kind of local Buddhist community there, and so did much more intensive meditation practice. And then since moving back to Boston, I've really tried to kind of integrate that, and just like my physical training tends to be very eclectic, right? I'm sort of eclectic and agnostic in the sense, I don't I like to stay away from dogma of saying like there is one best way to move or one best way to meditate. There are many great ways, and there are many wonderful techniques, and I think it's helpful to kind of learn about all of them because they all have different benefits and different drawbacks. And then ultimately, it is helpful to commit to one, because that way you can get good at it. So it's like, dig in, practice with a certain technique, learn it, and make it your own. And I think there's a
Mhm.
similar process with meditation, just like exercise, where in the beginning, it's helpful to start with like a clear structure, right? You just want somebody to hand you a program, right? Like, tell me what I should do for
Yeah.
my workout, right? Like, guide me through this meditation, just tell me what to do. And that's
Yeah.
sort of like your, right, that's your training wheels, and that's great. Like, if you're starting at something new, like, that's exactly what you need a lot of structure, right? And then as you show up and you practice and you get a little bit better at it, and you can start to do some of those things on your own, right? You don't need every single rep prescribed to you, or you don't need every single moment of the meditation to be guided, right? You can deal with longer periods of silence, or you can deal with like a workout program where it's just like yeah, here's 5 moves, like put them together in the way that makes sense for you. And so we're always moving towards kind of this progressing towards more and more freedom, more and more choice, as you figure out what works best for your mind and your body.
Oh, I love that. We here at Daily Origin, we want to help people do you, which means like you do you. Like, I'm going to do something that's good for me. Not what's good for me isn't always good for you. So, your points of trying different things, and even though you might try 8 different kinds of meditation, but finding the one that's right for you is always the journey that you should have, and really any part of like this wellness process that you're taking. So really great points there.
Yeah, and there is a bit of a caveat there that I just want to highlight, because I see this as a pitfall, both in the fitness world and in the meditation world, where I totally agree. Like, do you, and what's good for you isn't necessarily going to be what's good for me. Often it isn't at all, because we're in different bodies and different backgrounds and different goals, and we're in different places in our journey. And we live in such a wonderful time where you can access so much good materials. And thank you, Genevieve, for being part of this, like opening up this treasure chest of resources, saying like, hey, if you're interested in this sort of movement, or this sort of fitness, or this sort of meditation, like you can find it very easily. And so it is great to try different ones. However, the dark side of that is giving up too soon,
Yeah.
is not giving yourself enough time to stick with it, to begin to experience some of the results, some of the benefits, some of the joys. Because often, in those very first times, the whole thing kind of feels hard, because you've never done it before. It
Yeah.
feels challenging, it feels unfamiliar. And so you have to be willing to let yourself kind of muck through those early few stages, to at least get to a place where you're like, begin to have some competence, and you can kind of see what it's like for you. And so I think there people do themselves a bit of a disservice, where it's like you try something once and then you just completely foreclose and say, no, not for me, never going to do that ever
Yeah.
again. Right. And yeah, maybe there's situations where that's true, but I like to say, like, one data point usually isn't going to tell you all that much. Collect a few more data points if you can, then we can begin to look at some of those trend lines.
Oh, really great points. And it very much can be like associated with nutrition and finding that right nutrition for your body. A lot of people are giving up early on not seeing results after a week. And I know you work with a lot of clients and you develop recipes. What guidance can you give people? Is it similar to the fitness journey where you just got to stick with it, or?
Mm. Yeah, I'm glad you bring up the nutrition piece, because I do think it is analogous in a lot of ways. Um, you know, and this is what makes the work so nuanced and personalized, which is why I love getting to do one-on-one coaching, because it helps to just like have somebody to really dig into this with you and figure out, hey, what are the pieces of this that are working? What are the pieces that aren't? Okay, like, is this necessarily true? Like, do we need to keep trying it a little bit longer? I do think, as you said, it's like giving every quote unquote program a certain amount of time before you decide whether it's worked or not worked is important. And on the nutrition piece, the flip side to that is, I see a lot of people, maybe you had some sort of diet or way of eating that worked for you in the past, and maybe it helped you get in shape, or maybe, it just, that's what made you feel good 5 years ago. And so a lot of people then become reliant on that template, and then they're sitting there asking, well, like, wait a second, like, why isn't this working now? It used to work. And I
Yeah.
think that's really difficult for people too, is to upgrade, to let go, right? It's equally amount of letting go of some of those older eating habits, even the ones that were really helpful for you, just because right now, again, your body is different than it was yesterday, and it's different than it was a year ago. And so, whatever, the pattern of skipping breakfast, or not eating, carbs, or like whatever the thing was for you, again, as they, the classic saying, what got you here isn't necessarily going to be what's going to get you to where you want to go. And so I think a lot of times with the eating, it's just as much about focusing on the new plan it is saying, like, well, hey, like, what is all the things you're bringing into this? And
Mhm.
food, again, just like with the movement practices, there is a lot of baggage.
Yeah.
There is a lot of emotional baggage around food and eating and body image. And again, so much of that is things that we've inherited from our family, and from our childhood and so forth. And so it's like we begin to, again, critically examine that, and asking those same questions of, like, well, is this, and I feel like I'm sounding like Marie Kondo, like, is this way of eating sparking joy for me, right? And
I have to say,
that.
I have to say that if you don't mention her once in this conversation, it's not really a daily origin
Okay,
conversation.
good. Yeah. I mean, she's great, and I'm a huge fan of getting rid of clutter as well. And that's tricky, because then some people will say, well, yeah, eating an entire bag of Oreos sparks joy. And I'm like, well, like, does it really? Or, for what part of you does that bring you joy? And then for
Mhm.
what part of you does that bring not joy? Does that bring heaviness, guilt, sadness, bloatedness? And so it's like beginning to get a little more granular of seeing how so much, again, of our eating tends to be divided, where we're like, one part of us is yelling for this thing, and another part of us is saying, no, we should have that thing. And again, we need to just learn how to begin to integrate those voices, as opposed
Yeah.
to let them kind of run the show in this very chaotic way.
That's such a, like, I keep saying that's such a great point, but you're pulling up some really important things to talk about, where a lot of people, when they eat, it's just because they like what they eat. It's tasteful, it's good, and in that moment everything is on the positive side. But on the downside, you could have that bloating and guilt and anything else emotionally, but you could also have physical downsides to it. So looking at the full picture is a great way to view it too.
Right.
Now, with
Right.
everything in the world being so out there and there's so much information, how is someone to trust, like, what health trends are coming out that would be helpful? Or how does somebody navigate the nutrition world if they want to improve what they're doing?
Mm. The key word I hear you saying is trust. And trust is essential and core to so much of this stuff. Is something I talk a lot about. And I talk about it, you're raising a really great question of who to trust, of all the doctors and experts and wellness gurus and websites and magazines and, out there. It's like, which one do you trust? Which is a really valid question. And I think there's a certain amount of due diligence, of fact checking, of not taking everything for face value, of digging a little bit deeper and asking, like, well, who created this? What is their origin story? What's their background? Like, how are they profiting from this? I think is a legitimate and important question to ask. Because we live in a world where that's a big piece of all of this. And again, that doesn't necessarily make it unhealthy. It doesn't necessarily make it wrong, but it's really essential to just see what people's biases are, when,
Right.
especially when it comes to the nutrition, because everybody is going to have a lens and everybody's going to have a bias. And so it's just being honest about that. Like, if you're the paleo guy, and you've got your own brand of paleo snacks that you sell, like, they might be great snacks, and whether they're great for your body, that's something, again, we have to go and find out by experimenting and getting some data. But just being, clear that, like, of course, that, whatever you read on that guy's site is going to say that, paleo snacks are wonderful for you. So, that I think that goes back to this kind of media literacy, which is a big issue that I think something that, we need to really educate ourselves and educate the younger generation on, for sure, because, it's only going to get increasingly more complex. And then finding a few good trusted websites, and it's
Mhm.
just like this. You listen to a conversation and you're like, yeah, like the way that woman talked about it, like, really just resonated with me. Like, I like where she's coming from. I appreciate her attitude and mindset, and so it's like you can begin to develop some trust that way. And that's this external trust. But then I talk also so much about internal trust. And this might be a topic for a whole nother video series. But until we learn how to trust ourselves, again, until our mind learns how to trust our body and our body learns how to trust our minds, we're always going to be often kind of undermining and fighting against ourselves.
Oh, it's really good. I'm pulling out some points here. We're talking lots about trust, intuition or intuitive, and being honest. So really great topics here. I could probably, like you said, talk to you forever about nutrition and all the things out there. My last question around that really is, there's other services where you're testing, for food allergies and glucose levels. Are those services worth going into and paying for, or do you say, do your research more before you dive into doing those tests?
Yeah. Another fantastic question. You've opened up another door, the door towards, like, what do you test? What do you track? What metrics are important to pay attention to? And, and what technology, what wearable devices or what other things are you going to bring into this picture when it comes to this sort of health and wellness game? Another one of my, favorite topic. And I actually just finished writing a whole article about my journey. I spent a month with wearing a continuous blood glucose monitor, tracking my blood sugar, every single day, everything I ate, and how all my different exercise and activities affected that. And it was a really fascinating experiment for me, because I love data. I love getting insights into my body to understand things that I, especially with blood sugar, something that, I can't know what my blood sugar is unless I have some specific device to tell me. But then the question of, like, is it right for you? I'd say go read the article. I give a full review there, and then kind of suggest who I think it might be helpful for. So, on the whole, I say, if costs and convenience are like no issue to you, then I say, yeah, go get as many tests as you like, because why not? We get all the data, and then we sit down and we kind of figure out what it means. I do think it's important to have a coach or somebody that you can work with to unpack it, because a lot of times there's a lot of data and it's confusing and we don't know what it means. So turning data into something actionable is one part of the challenge here. And then, trying to figure out, if you've got a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, are you tracking your heart rate? Are you tracking your steps? Like, is that helpful for you? Does that nudge you, right, as it's designed to do, towards activities that you want to do more of? Or does that actually cause more frustration and more like guilt, because you're like, oh, I didn't close my rings today, I didn't get my steps, and then you get all down on yourself, right? And you're like, screw this, right? And then, maybe that demotivates you to do it the next day, or maybe not. Maybe that makes you get up and run up and down the stairs. I don't know. These are the funny and interesting ways in which, we're all kind of trying to figure out how to best live with and integrate these technological pieces. But I'd say there's a lot of really cool testing out there that's available. Again, this movement towards personalized medicine, personalized nutrition, it really puts the power back in the hands of the consumer to be able to say, like, hey, like, I know what's going on with my microbiome, and I know what's going on with my blood, and I know what's going on with my cardiorespiratory systems. Like, you can show up at your doctor's office and have way more information than they would even necessarily have or look to have. And that's, on one hand, really, really empowering and really awesome. On the other hand, it can be kind of overwhelming, expensive, and confusing, and not necessarily helpful for you. So, it's one of these it depends conversations.
No, that's a great answer. And personally, I just been seeing so much about all those tests, and that was more of a I want to know what you think personal
Hmm.
question. So thank you for taking the time to answer that. Now, we always talk about business sides of things and the business that you're running currently. Was that something you dreamt up about a long time ago and you just been doing it, or has it always been where you saw yourself going is running this business?
I wouldn't say I always saw myself going here. Um, I started, Jeff Siegel Wellness as its own entity about 7, 8 years ago when I finished a graduate program. I finished a master's in education, and I uh, was at that one of these crossroads in life where I didn't have another job lined up because I didn't want to go back into teaching in kind of a traditional classroom where I had come from previously. And I knew I was interested, as talking about my origin story and helping people learn about their bodies, improve their health, come into a better relationship with their body. And so I was like, how could I turn this into a sustainable business? And so it started with me getting my personal training certification, kind of working as a personal trainer, and then building and getting more coaching certification and background, and then pulling in all my education and other kind of work into it. And so it kind of slowly kind of began to take its own shape, and it's still taking shape. It's still evolving and growing. um, I shifted to a lot of remote coaching even prior to COVID, which just happened to be lucky and
Yeah.
worked out in that realm. And it's always evolving because I'm always asking, you know, how can I best be of service, and how can I best help people take better care of themselves? And again, sometimes that means like getting physical and like getting outside and working together on the kind of workout side of things. But a lot of the times it means just sitting down, as I said, slowing down, tuning in, asking some of those deep, important, meaningful questions about what's going on in your body and where do you want to go with all of this. And then helping people create some structure and some outlines, and have a good action plan that they can work on. And that way every day isn't just a crapshoot, but it's like, yeah, these are the things that are important and that I'm gonna practice with. And so that's where I tend to kind of dig in at the one-on-one level. And I'm hoping to kind of grow and expand what I do to work at an even bigger scale, because recognizing individual change is so important, and we need a hell of a lot of collective change at the social and the cultural level, because there's so many cultural forces that are pushing us towards pain and discomfort and disease. And I think we really need to have some pretty large interventions, if not revolutions, at that
Right.
level. Yeah.
I'm behind that. I like the way if that starts happening, I'm all for it. I'll be behind you 100%. Um, so as a business owner, what's one of the most important lessons that you've learned?
Mm. Ooh. Um, it's funny because I have a couple reminders up on my wall right here behind my computer. One of them is this beautifully designed postcard that says, "Everything takes longer than you think." So I mean, that's one lesson that I want to put out into the world. I guess it's a lesson of patience. That you can have a really good idea, you can be a really awesome, skilled person, um, and success rarely ever happens overnight, and it takes days of hard work. Sometimes you really got to be hustling, especially in those early phases. It's okay to kind of hustle, but just you trust and you keep showing up, right, and just keep kind of following that guiding light. I truly believe that you can create something beautiful. That would be one piece. The other piece is building your board of directors or creating your support network. Like, make sure you've got people around you and surrounding you that are there, that you can lean upon when you need some advice or some help, but then also that are encouraging you to show up as your best self. I could not be here doing what I'm doing now if I didn't have my own coaches, if I didn't have my wonderful wife helping support me and help me grow and learn from all of my mistakes, if I didn't have my family and all these other things that help make this possible. So I think just recognizing that none of us are meant to do this alone. It is a team effort. So thinking about who is on your team and how can you build out a really good team is an important thing for any business, even if your business is kind of you as an individual solopreneur.
No, that's really great advice, because I think when people think, your business is under your name, so it's just you, but it's really not just you. You need to have that support system. You need to have your network or your board of directors, like you said. So really great advice. Thanks so much for sharing that. Just to wrap it up, how can people find you? What should we expect from you in the future?
Yeah, the is why I named the business Jeff Siegel Wellness, because I was like, what's the most like straightforward way to get this across? Like who I am, what do I do? So you can find me at jeffsiegelwellness.com. You can find me on social at Jeff Siegel Wellness. If you just Google Jeff Siegel Wellness, should get you where you need to go. There's lots of ways to be in touch with me, and I'd love to hear from you. So like, please email me if you have any questions. I want to hear your story. I want to know your origin. What's on the horizon? The biggest thing for me right now is I am in the process of writing a book. It is about what I call the game of embodiment, and and I'm discussing how all of us are playing this game from the moment we're born to the moment our bodies pass away. And there are different levels to the game. There's a bunch of monsters along the way. There's some power gems and some skills that we need to build up our experience points. And so I kind of frame all of this as gameplay, but I'm really talking about what does it take to make your body healthy? What does it take to engage in fitness? How do we develop higher levels of well-being and healing? And like, what is the progression through that? I think a lot of what's missing from the current landscape is it doesn't talk about this from a developmental lens. So that's something I'm trying to bring into this book of the pieces. There is a sequence that we all kind of have to go through that makes sense, that helps us kind of unlock that next level. And so keep your eyes tuned for the book, The Embodiment Game,
That
hopefully coming out sometime early next year.
that's so excited, and I can't wait to read it myself. Thanks so much for sharing all you had to share today. And like Jeff said, we'll link his website, his Instagram, and the article that you mentioned earlier below this video itself. Thanks so much, Jeff, for joining us today.
Thank you, Genevieve. Take care.